So welcome everyone to the next program in our Berkeley Law BCLT career series. Once again, we are fortunate that Wilson Sonsini was willing to donate some more time to explain another practice area to us that can look a little mysterious. And if it doesn't look mysterious, you may not be asking enough questions because it's not always clear from websites on its face, what a corporate life sciences practice looks like. Most of us have the experience of having some corporate law classes, but what does that look like in the tech world? What does that look like in the life sciences world? What does that look like in a law firm that specializes in technology and innovation-based clients? I think you'll find a lot of this interesting and intriguing. I spent most of my life in this type of industry, and it's really exciting. And what you find is that the foundation of places like Silicon Valley, Boston, San Diego really often centers around these specific type of life sciences practices, corporate life sciences practices. And so with that, I wanted to thank you, Amanda, Alison, for joining us today. I really wanted to just kick off with an initial question that people should ask. What is a corporate life sciences practice generally, and what does it mean in a firm like Wilson?
Sure, I'll kick us off. Thanks, Wayne. I'm Amanda Urquiza. I'm a corporate partner, and I focus my practice largely on life sciences companies with a mix of tech companies as well. So happy to provide some color on the differences between those clients. Generally, life sciences focuses on the development and commercialization of life sciences products, so pharmaceuticals, medical devices, biotech programs. It's largely IP focused, but we are corporate lawyers, and so we support companies in every stage of their growth, from formation, fundraising, IPOs, M&A, public company governance and representation, everything that our life sciences clients do. We as corporate attorneys support them in those efforts. You absolutely do not need a hard sciences background to support life sciences companies. Of course, if you have exposure to a scientific background, it can be an asset, but I do not have that background, and I work with companies all the time on the specific needs that arise for our life sciences clients. Alison, anything that you would add?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alison Sechrest. I am a second-year associate at Wilson Sonsini in the Palo Alto office. I don't have much to add there. I would just say that while it is a corporate practice, a lot of it is still guided by the issues that life sciences companies are facing. And we can talk about it a little bit more later, but sometimes those issues are different depending on the stage of the company, whether they're public or private, whether they're early stage private or later stage private, getting ready to potentially go public. So it can have a broad meaning. And also, like Amanda said, there's no need to have a really intense scientific background in order to do this corporate practice, because at the end of the day, while we are involved in the business and understanding the client, it's also a corporate practice. So we do a lot of the general corporate work that you might do for technology and other kinds of companies as well.
So if you're around the Valley or Boston, you're going to get exposure to a lot of the tech emerging companies and the tech corporate side. So often people just fork that idea over, well, life sciences must look just like tech. To people in a garage come in with an idea. I'm a little skeptical of any medical device that comes out of a garage, but maybe so. So what kind of corporate clients does the life sciences practice overall encompass, and then how does Wilson focus on one portion of that, or do they focus on one portion of the life sciences practice?
That's a great question. So you're absolutely right, Wayne. We are tech and life sciences or biotech clients share a special place in our heart because they're focused on innovation, they're entrepreneurial, they're growing quickly. But there are some differences and there are some specific types of companies that we see in our client base a little bit more often in our life sciences practice. So I would say the large part of the clients I have are biotech clients that are developing a certain type of product candidate or product candidates to target certain types of indications or illnesses. I would say a lot of my clients are developing pharmaceuticals to tackle some of the largest medical challenges that we see. We also have companies that are adjacent to that. So they're developing technologies that support companies that are developing pharmaceuticals. We have medical devices. So we have each of the attorneys of the firm may have a different suite of clients that are broadly in the life sciences industry and can be at any stage of development. So we really do have clients that are, two folks in a garage or in an office that just have an idea that they're advancing, all the way to companies that are commercializing their products, have commercialized their products, are doing strategic and complex partnerships, acquiring products from other companies, public companies that are facing complex disclosure issues around the development of their products, around patent and other IP conflicts that arise with respect to their products. So we really can have a bit of diversity within the life sciences practice. And then, of course, we see clients at each stage of their development. Anything that you'd say on the clients that you support, Alison?
I think it's pretty similar. Like you think of the traditional tech entrepreneur, and so you might not think that the life sciences founders are the same, but in some ways they are, in some ways they aren't. I think a lot of that is also probably driven by the fact that we're based in Palo Alto, and so we see a lot of those entrepreneurial founder types, both in tech and life sciences. I think something else that I would add to is that a lot of the life sciences founders that we have are coming from universities or still affiliated with their universities, which also brings up kind of some IP issues that we don't handle directly, but we have to be very cognizant of and work with other teams within the firm on, what just in terms of getting something started off the ground, if there's going to be their relationship with the university or, licensing some IP from the university. So I think that that's probably the other thing I would add. We have a lot of professors who are starting companies or, technology is coming out of their lab, coming from their research, and they want to try to commoditize that. And so they'll use a company to do that. I think that's all I would add.
I picked up a term that you used, Amanda, and I think it's worth making clear. Life sciences is kind of a made up term that encompasses lots of different things. And you used biotech, and that's the classic biology-based invention. Life sciences also encompasses, and my new favorite word, health tech, which apparently encompasses everything related to health and AI that is out there. So it's a pretty broad category, from classic drugs to medical devices to your health apps you might find on your phone. And I think you do them all, that entire category.
Absolutely. And the work can vary across different types of organizations. So if they're more on the health tech side, they tend to look a little bit more like our traditional technology clients. If they're on the biotech side and they're developing pharmaceuticals, they're sort of our bread and butter, life sciences clients that we think of as kind of the lion's share of clients we see. But yeah, we're seeing everything across the board under the life sciences umbrella. But I would say the traditional client that we would see would be sort of pharmaceutical focus. But of course, we do have health tech, and we have all sorts of interesting innovations that, we see, especially as you mentioned, because AI is such a hot area right now that a lot of our traditionally tech-focused companies are starting to look at life sciences and ask, how can we support this industry? So we're seeing a lot in our tech sector that's adjacent to life sciences. So there's a bit of blurring of lines. As Alison mentioned, though, I think that the client base can generally be a bit different. I think having doctors and scientists as your primary people that you interact with within your client can be very different than having, engineers or business folks that are coming out of B school who are starting a tech company. You have with the doctors and scientists, you can have a lot more, sort of scientific thinking, and the methods that are used, even, on the business side of things, can emulate what you would see in the scientific sectors. So, I love working with doctors and scientists. And I think that because a lot of the life scientists or life sciences industry is driven by the desire to solve some of the largest medical problems in the world, there's a level of passion and engagement around solving things like cancer or, HIV or major, issues that impact the lives of so many people on the planet in a way that's different than tech. I mean, you're definitely impacted by software and, big data, but a lot of what our companies are doing, it really does impact the day-to-day lives of people. And so when we see their business grow and develop, and we help them, get through a financing so that they have more cash on their balance sheet so they can do their next stage in their development of their product, it's a different kind of energy that we see sometimes with, doctors that are trying to solve a medical issue versus tech giants that are trying to do the next great, game or app. So it can be a little bit different of a client base in terms of personalities and what our clients are solving for.
Well, when you look at some of the firms that very specifically say they do life sciences or pharmaceutical practices, when you look at their client base, they're representing Merck.
Yeah.
They're the very top gigantic elite firms that we see in every advertisement that everybody knows is a brand name. Sounds like your client base is different than that. What does that mean for your work? How does your work vary from the corporate lawyer that does work for a Merck?
Yes, so that's such a great question. And Alison would be a great contributor to this because she is one of our rock star junior associates who supports a lot of our startup clients. We definitely have clients across the corporate spectrum. So we do have, we will represent a Merck or a Pfizer on big deals, but more often than not, we're representing our startup clients. We're taking them public. We have our newly public, biotech companies that are just learning how to be public companies. So I would say that our client base is growing fast, innovating quickly, navigating issues for the first time a lot of the time. And so our junior associates, especially with our very early stage companies, have a crucial role in supporting them as they're navigating some very early corporate conundrums. So I don't know, Alison, do you have a couple things you might be able to share in terms of what you do to support our stage of clients?
Yeah, I think about them kind of in a few separate buckets because they'll have different issues at different stages. So with the earlier stage clients, and I work across all stages of clients. So I work on incorporation, so day one or even day zero employees, like just getting a charter filed with Delaware and getting the founding team together. I work with a couple later stage private companies who are further along in their development process, but aren't going public right now, or maybe just don't need to. And then also with some younger biotechs, so young public company biotechs who are relatively recently public. They have some, time under their belt as public companies, but are still, they haven't been doing this for 20 years the way that some other companies have been doing it. So with the earlier stage companies, it's still a lot of general corporate work. I think the things you're thinking about from a life sciences perspective are on more of the corporate things still. So like I mentioned, agreements with the universities, consulting agreements for the founders if they're going to be spending time at their university, and also with the company, just working with our technology transactions folks on those issues as well. I think then maybe with the later stage private companies, it's more the things that I see are more of just their fundraising needs. So we'll do their financings and then general corporate matters as they're, growing and continuing to grow. Like Amanda mentioned, a lot of our companies are growing very quickly. And so they are always needing to raise more money because they don't have revenue streams coming in the way that a traditional tech company might pretty quickly start gearing up customers. A lot of times our clients don't have that luxury of having money in the door all the time, or at least sometimes. And then with the public companies, I think you see you're more involved in their business and you're thinking a lot more about the product candidates and the issues that they're facing at like a core business level, because you're thinking about the kind of disclosure that needs to go into their disclosure package in their filings with the SEC. And so you're reading about, the trials that they have going on, the stages of their product candidates. You're advising them on what would be material. And Amanda can talk more about, determining materiality or things that need to be disclosed, but those are the kinds of things that we are thinking about when it comes to the public company clients. And I would say as a junior, you still get a lot of exposure to those bigger issues that I think I didn't always expect, or I know that I didn't expect to have as, a rising second year associate. You see a lot of new and novel issues come up, and our teams are still fully staffed and we have great, excellent teams, but we are also leanly staffed as well, we like to say. So we are working very closely together, and I think you can be asked to do a lot if you're willing to do it, which is really fun, a really fun part of the practice.
And I would just piggyback quickly on Alison's note about the companies that we work with and how we get close to their business. I think companies like a big pharmaceutical company like Merck or Pfizer, they have in-house legal teams that are, 100 attorneys deep. And so when we work with our smaller companies that have just gone public or are going public, or even smaller private companies, they may not have an in-house lawyer when they're private, and then when they go public and they're newly public companies, they may have 1 or 2 or 3 in-house attorneys. And because they have not been public for 20 years, they are really dependent on us as an extension of their legal team. And so we really do get closer to their business, think more critically around disclosure issues. We know their business well. And so when we advise and counsel on what is material, what needs to be disclosed, how to think about that when you go through an IPO or when you're a public company, we're a lot closer to the business. We're a lot closer to the executives. We're in the board meetings. And so that is a much more intimate way of practicing than if we had a lot of the sort of big clients that have huge legal teams and outsourced pieces of that. I would also say, because a lot of our companies are pre-commercial, they are not generating revenue yet. And so unlike our tech companies and unlike our more advanced public companies that are pharmaceutical companies, these companies are raising money, trying to gather, cash on their balance sheet and utilizing that to advance their product candidates, which is a lot different than, than what you might see with a tech company that has, is very financials focused. A lot of our biotech companies, you won't see many changes in their financials period over period. It's just sort of a change in their cash because they're getting cash and then they're burning down their cash as they're trying to advance their product candidates. Whereas our tech clients are more sophisticated. Pharma clients, financials do matter. They have an earnings cycle. And so the type of issues that come up on our size clients, or the clients that we advise, can be a bit different than our more sophisticated clients.
So, one of my complaints for the students that are trying to figure out law firms and practices is, they go to a website, they look at a website. Law firm websites are nothing if not confusing, because everybody does everything, every firm does everything, and it looks like all the websites were drafted pretty much by the same person. It's almost impossible to tell them apart. And the corporate world's even more difficult because every firm has a corporate practice. And then they list everything they do. And somewhere in that list, it'll say life sciences. How am I supposed to read that? Is that true? Is everybody that has a corporate practice necessarily got a life sciences practice? Obviously, the tone of my voice may indicate some skepticism, but or just general distaste for a lot of law firm websites. But it is confusing because this is a place where everybody says they do this, and it just doesn't seem right to me.
I think you're totally on point. Law firms by nature market their practices, but it doesn't mean that every law firm has an equally strong or focused or dedicated practice. So we at Wilson do have a dedicated life sciences practice. It's a huge part of our client base. I would say that if you are looking for a firm that focuses on life sciences, I would look to the firms that focus on tech specifically, because I think that several of them are focused on tech and life sciences, and also look at the firms that have a presence in the life sciences hubs. So the Bay Area, San Diego, Boston, there are geographical hubs where there is a lot of activity on the life sciences front. There are firms that are operating in each of those geographies that have a more dedicated and deep life sciences practice, or supporting companies as they grow through their entire life cycle as a life sciences company. And so even though some firms may have some touch point to life sciences, I think the best place to practice is somewhere where you have a full service firm that supports life sciences on many fronts. So you have, subject matter experts in IP, in, the soft IP. You want folks who have worked with companies that have benefits issues that are specific to life sciences companies. So for example, right now, a lot of life, early stage public life sciences companies have had a drop in their stock. And so a lot of them are looking to do option exchange tender offers. And that's really become a little bit of a cottage industry for the benefits work that life sciences companies need. And a lot of them are doing pipes right now, which are a specific type of fundraising transaction. And so you'll want to look at firms that are catering to the industry in a number of different practice areas. And so I think looking at tech companies is a good first start if you're interested in life sciences. Looking at the firms that have a strong presence in the geographical areas where life sciences companies are growing and emerging, which is often centered around universities. You'll see we just opened a Boulder office because there's a strong, growth in the industry in that area. So if you look at what firms are doing in the various geographies and how they support the life sciences practice more broadly, I think that'll give you a sense of which firms have a broader dedication. Alison, anything that you would add?
One small thing I would add, or larger, I guess, you can also look at the materials that the firms have too. So we have life sciences and tech reports, and those are not just specific to what Wilson is doing, but they at least represent the areas of interest that we have. And so we have our entrepreneurs reports, life sciences reports for both capital markets deals and private financings for public companies. And so you can kind of get a sense of what areas a firm is focused on based on other materials that they have available too.
Those are all good places to look if you know to look there. That's the trick as a student. You got to know where to look. Well, I think the last question I'd like to pose to both of you is, if I'm a student, I'm interested in life sciences, or I'm interested in corporate law, but now I'm interested in maybe the specialty of life sciences within corporate law. What do you recommend for path in law school? What do you recommend for networking, questions to ask at hiring events? What's your best advice for people that want to know more about this area?
I think my best advice is find junior level attorneys at the firms that have a dedicated life sciences practice and ask them about their experience. Ask them substantively what type of work they do, whether they're happy, what their grievances are, do they have autonomy, are they given responsibility, do they have work-life balance, get details about the substantive aspects of the practice and the practical aspects of being an attorney at the firms of interest. And I would say start there. I think Allison's point of reading the materials that come out of the firms can be really helpful substantively in helping you get on board and figuring out what transactions are happening, what types of things occur in the life sciences industry. But I think there is not really a replacement for talking to people who are just a little ahead of where you are in an area of interest, because they'll be able to tell you what they do and what the experience of practicing at the different firms actually feels like.
Yeah, and I would say, so I'm open to I'm open to chatting with people too, because I think that was, as a second year, I think some of the most helpful people to me when I was making my decisions about where I wanted to interview or what firm I wanted to join. The people who were most helpful to me were, first and second year associates who were just a few years ahead of me. A lot of them are still mentors to me to this day, both at the firm that I'm at and across the board in other offices and firms, just because I talk to people with broad practices as well. So I talk to people who do tech and life sciences, but I was talking to people who did other kinds of work just to see what else was out there and make sure I kind of knew what different practice areas looked like so that I could make an informed decision for myself when I was interviewing and accepting an offer. And so I think that's like the best thing that you can do. Go to as many events as you can when they're put on, listening to panels. People will always have different things that they want to focus on. And so it's good to just kind of hear from a lot of different voices and then follow up with the people who have who are saying things that you're interested in and where you have, more questions.
And I think for classes, I would take your corporations or business associations class, securities regulation, and then get some exposure to IP, just because I think that conceptually you won't need to know everything in that class to practice corporate life sciences work, but conceptually understanding how IP works can be super helpful when you enter into the practice.
And one more, if your universities or law schools have it, venture capital classes can be super helpful too, because you will inevitably come across venture financings in a corporate practice. And so getting your bearings about those early on is super helpful. So that was one benefit that I had at my law school. So if that's available to you, I would recommend it as well. Well,
it's no surprise, Berkeley's full of those classes. So
yeah.
Well, and I want to add it, one third voice. The most powerful advice you'll get is from junior, mid-level associates. I see people that want to, Amanda and I know this from being partners, that people want to ask us questions about being a junior associate. One, I don't remember, and two, if I did remember, it's 20 years dated. Would you like to know what it was like 20 years ago? Sure. It's not that useful in terms of what's going to happen day to day. And it's really important. And there's no one more important to a career than somebody 3 years more senior. That's going to be your mentor. That's going to be your guide. That's going to be the person that keeps you from making terrible mistakes. And that's going to be the person that helps you fix them when you make them, because you will. We all do. So the takeaway I'll leave here is that Alison is the person you need to seek out here. So I want to thank you both for weighing in and providing this, kind of not just for Berkeley students, but for students across the country. A lot of big decisions to be made, and this will add some good knowledge. So thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.